Hello and welcome to India's World. Tibetan spiritual leader, the 14th Dalai Lama, is scheduled to visit Arunachal Pradesh, including Tawang. China claims Arunachal Pradesh as southern Tibet and has objected to the visit. It has claimed that the Dalai Lama's visit would inflict severe damage on the Sino-Indian relationship and on peace and stability on the border. However, India has rejected China's claim, saying that the Dalai Lama's visit was purely a religious one. Many observers suspect that the increased intensity of Chinese reaction to the activities of the Dalai Lama also stem from the attempts to exert control over the process of reincarnation of the Tibetan Buddhist leader. The Dalai Lama is 81 years old and in fine fettle. However, he has said he will not be reincarnated in territory controlled by China. But the communist government, which promotes atheism, has asserted that the Dalai Lama will be reincarnated on its territory. To discuss the increasing intensity of Chinese objections to the activities of the Dalai Lama, concerns about his mortality, reincarnation, and its political implications, we have with us a very distinguished panel of experts. We have with us Ambassador Kanwal Sibal, a former Foreign Secretary of India. He's been India's ambassador to Turkey, Egypt, France and Russia. We have with us Mr. Jayadeva Ranade. He's former Additional Secretary in the Cabinet Secretariat and is President of the Center for China Analysis and Strategy. And we have with us Dr. Jabin Jacob. He's Fellow at the Institute of Chinese Studies, New Delhi. I welcome you gentlemen to this discussion. Ambassador Sibal, can I begin with you? This is not the first time that the Dalai Lama is visiting Arunachal Pradesh. He had been there in 2009. He had been there in 1983, 1993, 2003. Why does China get upset each time the Dalai Lama goes to Arunachal Pradesh? And do you find anything different in Chinese reaction this time as compared to the previous reactions?
Two things. One, as you rightly said, that they have protested when the Dalai Lama has visited Arunachal Pradesh and even Tawang. And I saw their reaction in the 90s, which was couched in very similar terms. But after that, we had the 1996 agreement, 2005 agreement and other agreements. And if you look at the kind of reactions they give when the US president or other leaders want to meet the Dalai Lama, they're very strongly worded and warning that the relationship would be deeply impacted and this and that. This is Chinese style of diplomacy. So I don't take it too seriously. Now, if they have this time actually gone beyond what they've been saying in the past, is because the general atmosphere of our relations has become more tense. And they are now openly opposing us on very sensitive issues, which are actually not core interests of China, but they are conveying a message to us that we should not look forward to any easing of pressure by them on differences that we have. And in fact, they're increasing the differences by opposing us on NSG and Masood Azhar and the CPEC and everything else. So I would say that if people have noted that this is a stronger reaction in the past, it is because of the overall atmosphere in our relations, but I don't attach too much importance to it.
Mr. Ranade, do you think the Chinese objection this time around is also focused on Tawang? Because Tawang, after all, happens to be the birthplace of the 6th Dalai Lama.
Yes, I think firstly I agree with what Ambassador Sibal has said, that to an extent the strong reactions coming out of China today, at least from the Chinese media, is because of the tension in India-China relations, the existing tension. But yes, there are two worries or two concerns that China has. Firstly, the visit by the Dalai Lama to Tawang, I think they're associating it with the fact that the 6th Dalai Lama was born there, and possibly that this Dalai Lama might think of his reincarnation being found in Tawang itself, which would accentuate the difficulties that Beijing will face in event that there are two Dalai Lamas. Why I'm saying two Dalai Lamas is that one will be the Dalai Lama's reincarnation, the present Dalai Lamas. The second, that Beijing declared last year that they will decide on the Dalai Lama and they will appoint the Dalai Lama. So it opens the way for two Dalai Lamas, same tension that there is in two Panchen Lamas. I think that is the worry. And the second aspect I'd like to mention is that China has laid claim to Arunachal Pradesh. And this is one way in which they're reinforcing their claim over Arunachal Pradesh. So the Dalai Lama's visit is actually a kind of an excuse. That is how I would look at this present.
Okay. Dr. Jacob, the Chinese objection to Dalai Lama's visit to Arunachal Pradesh comes days after he was criticized for attending International Buddhist Conference in Rajgir in Bihar. But why was there an objection? The subject of the conference was pretty innocuous, Buddhism in the 21st century. if Buddhist leaders don't discuss this, who will discuss it?
Well, I think the most important point as far as the Chinese are concerned is that they do not view the Dalai Lama as only a religious leader or as a religious leader. They consider him a splittist, a separatist, and for him, for them, he is a political activist. So, which is why they object to the Dalai Lama's presence anywhere in the world. So, no matter that they say this is a religious function, for them it's a political issue. And you know, Dalai Lama cannot be seen only you know, as performing a religious function as far as the Chinese are concerned. So I think that's their problem.
Yeah. Now this Rajgir conference, Master Sibal, was attended by Buddhist leaders from all over the world. So just to give you an idea who attended, the Sangha heads of Cambodia and Bangladesh, the Mahanayakes and the Anunayakes of Sri Lanka, the Khamba Lama, the Supreme Lama of Mongolia. After the problem they've had with China, they still sent him. The representative Buddhists from Vietnam, Japan, Taiwan, Malaysia, even some Russian republics, and all the 3 Buddhist sects from Tibet were represented, and the Karmapa was also there. So do you think the Chinese objected because they don't want the Dalai Lama to be projected as the undisputed leader of the Buddhist world?
No, I don't think Dalai Lama can be projected as the undisputed leader of the Buddhist world in general, but obviously a very eminent Buddhist personality. Yes, that everybody would accept. But what you have mentioned just now about the kind of representation there was from all over the Buddhist world, and the Dalai Lama being one of the principal figures there, actually would worry China, because Dalai Lama is that getting an exposure through his spiritual work, which has political implications, because from within the Buddhist network, he is being projected as a kind of a leader and a personality with wide international backing. And actually, at the end of the day, between spiritual and the political, there's always a thin line, because the Pope is a spiritual figure, but also he's a political figure. But one thing I would like to mention in relation to Tawang, the Chinese position is actually absurd. They are saying that Tawang should belong to them because it is part of southern Tibet, and it is linked to Tibetan culture and Tibetan whatever it is. Now, if Tawang is such an important spiritual place in Buddhism, and if Dalai Lama is a spiritual leader of Tibet, so Tawang is important to him. So why are they objecting him to go to Tawang? They can't have it both ways, that Tawang is very important as a Buddhist, Tibetan Buddhist place, and yet the Dalai Lama can't go there.
Okay, all right. We need to take a break at this point. We'll be back again in a bit. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're discussing Chinese objections to activities of the Dalai Lama in India, including attending international Buddhist conferences and visiting Arunachal Pradesh. Mr. Ranade, why is the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama such a big problem for China? And why have they been insisting, as you yourself pointed out, that the next Dalai Lama, the reincarnation would be found in China itself? How can they decide this?
Well, it's a strange thing. I mean, you've got communist atheists who are going to decide on a religious head. But, you know, they've had an experience, or they're still suffering from the consequences, if I may say, of having selected their own Panchen Lama. After having spirited away and put aside from public gaze the Panchen Lama who was selected by the Dalai Lama. So they have this tension, and the Panchen Lama selected by them, who by the way gave his first speech at the Chinese People's Political Conference this time in March, he is not yet recognized as a Panchen Lama by the people of Tibet. So there are 6 million Tibetans inside China. They still don't recognize him that. It's only now that they recognize him as a learned monk. The Dalai Lama, on the other hand, if a similar situation arises, it will split the Tibetan people. In fact, not split, most of them will still look to the reincarnation whom this present Dalai Lama has said will be found at a certain place. But I think the Chinese are also working to prevent such a situation. So one of the senior faculty members, Jin Wei, of the Central Party School, she had in fact said that, you know, we must at all costs avoid a situation of two Dalai Lamas, like that of 2 Panchen Lamas. The worry for the Chinese is that if the 6 million Tibetans inside China decide to turn violent, they feel that the President Dalai Lama's controls and instruction of ahimsa or non-violence, if that is lifted, then there will be chaos. So they don't want something like what is happening in Xinjiang to happen here and affect more than half the land area of China.
Okay. Jabin, the Dalai Lama's statements about reincarnation have been pretty confusing. He said different things at different points of time. At one point, he said he will only be reincarnated in a free country, which rules out China completely for him. So then, what will be the legitimacy of the Dalai Lama who's found by the Chinese in Chinese territory or in unfree Tibet or unfree or undemocratic territory?
The problem is that most of the Tibetans in the world actually live in Chinese-controlled territory. So, if the Chinese choose a Dalai Lama from within their territory, and given the amount of control in Tibet, I think the Chinese can run with this choice for quite a bit. Now, Dalai Lama's confusing statements, as you put it, are the result of the fact that this is still a work in progress. I mean, he has to negotiate both the political issues involved as well as the spiritual. And he's also trying to take Tibetans to a post, or to more secular setup. So in which he and I suppose others in the Tibetan intellectual world are examining the question of whether there is a requirement for a Dalai Lama.
But if the Dalai Lama is a child, let's say, and found a few years after the 14th Dalai Lama is no more, who will deal with the Chinese in the interim, in that 4-5 year period when there is no Dalai Lama, reincarnation has not been found? And even if that reincarnation is found, would they have to be a Regency Council, and would the Chinese deal with the Regency Council?
There are several issues involved. Firstly, let me say that the Chinese position or worry that the next Dalai Lama may actually be reincarnated in Tawang is again a contradictory position. Because part of the reason why they claim Tawang is because the 6th Dalai Lama came from there. So if the 15th comes from there, then what's the problem? Then they can claim Tawang even more. So this is an absurd argument. Number two, there is the Panchen Lama who is going to actually play a very vital role in the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama. But since the Panchen Lama himself is not accepted as the veritable Panchen Lama, so in any case there's a huge problem that China faces. Thirdly, my understanding is that actually the Dalai Lama is strategizing on how this question should be handled, and they are making moves to bring all the Tibetan sects together and then take a view. In other words, that the Chinese cannot divide the Tibetans over this issue, and the fact that all the sects would have adopted a common position about the procedure to be followed and how the reincarnation would take place would mean, therefore, that indirectly the Dalai Lama and these leaders of various sects would have the final say in this, and the Chinese will not be able to manipulate the situation the way they want.
Okay. But that question still has not been answered, that if there's a child who's found, even through unanimity, who's the reincarnation, how does China deal with a child?
Well, there are two issues here. One is that Dalai Lama has not yet made a clear statement on whether he will be reincarnated or not. And that statement, I understand, will come in about 2 years or between 2 to 3 years.
He has also said that the institution of Dalai Lama is man-made and it did not exist after him. That's also a possibility.
Well, he's made a number of statements, but if we assume that he will be reincarnated, he has said that he'll make a statement on that in the next 2 to 3 years. He's also thrown up another possibility of what he calls an emanation.
That's right.
Which will do away with this thing of a child being found and growing up. There'll be an emanation who will be older and who will come in. But in any case, they will form a Regency Council for a child if there is a reincarnation who will guide him. But there are vulnerabilities here, because after all, the regents who are going to be there will exercise a lot of power. They will have access to a lot of money and assets. Can they be won over? Will there be a falling out among them itself? Will be one question. The second is the new emanation or even the new reincarnation will take a number of years before he acquires that kind of stature as the present Dalai Lama has. And one of the things that is worrying the Chinese is the stature of the Dalai Lama, which is why they've started trying to undermine his authority, trying to prevent other countries and heads of governments from receiving him, in order to see that it doesn't grow. His authority doesn't grow. So I think the new reincarnation or the emanation is in any case going to have a problem. One, to assert his authority over the other sects, which technically he cannot. The second, to gain international acceptance. And the third, to be in a position from where he can tell the Chinese that I will negotiate with you. If they don't consider him powerful enough, they will not.
Okay, so Jayadeva, if there is a child Dalai Lama, 15th Dalai Lama, or there's an emanation who's much older, do you think the Chinese will start dealing with the Tibetan government in exile, the Prime Minister of the government in exile? And also, would not the institution of Dalai Lama become controversial if there's emanation and not everybody accepts that emanation?
No, I think the Chinese are not going to give in so easily to whatever the Dalai Lama is going to plan, emanation or reincarnation. I think they will want to, go by the process that they have been working on for so many years, which is to, use the golden urn and, have a reincarnation born in Tibet, because that's the traditional way, that's the safest option for them. Anything else, the Regency Council or a non-reincarnation complicates matters for them. And I don't think that they will at any stage decide to deal
but
officially
they don't
with
control the
government.
situation. They won't be able to control the emanation. They won't be able to control a 4-year or 5-year-old child being found outside Tibet.
No, the thing is, I think they will also bank on the fact that it's not so. Others, that is the Tibetan government in exile, also might not be able to control a situation post Dalai Lama. I think that's what they're banking on, which is why they are playing this role, as Mr. Ranade said, of trying to undermine the Dalai Lama's legitimacy when he's alive.
Okay. All right. We need to take a break at this point. We'll be back in a bit. Stay with us. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're discussing the Chinese objections to the activities of Dalai Lama in India and his visit to Arunachal Pradesh. Sibal, of the four main Buddhist sects of Tibet, the Gelug headed by the Dalai Lama, the Kagyu headed by the Karmapa, the Nyingmas, they have several heads, and the Sakya, they have hereditary lamas. Now of these, only the first three, that is the Gelug, Kagyu and Nyingma, believe in reincarnation. So there are so many lamas being reincarnated at different points of time. Why are the Chinese worried only about one sect, that is the Gelug, which is headed by the Dalai Lama?
No, clearly the Dalai Lama is the preeminent figure, and by tradition he is the temporal and the spiritual head of the Tibetans. That's why the Dalai Lama is absolutely important in terms of dealing with the Tibetan question. But some of the issues that you raised earlier and discussed earlier, I had an occasion to talk to very, very recently to the people that matter on the Tibetan side. And I got the sense that they are equally probing for an answer and they see the difficulties ahead, which is why, as I mentioned earlier, the Dalai Lama is actively involved in bringing the heads of all the sects together to adopt a common position as to see how this issue can be dealt with and how the possibility of China intervening in the process can be, as far as possible, eliminated. It's not going to be easy for the Chinese, with the experience of the Panchen Lama, to appoint someone and then get the backing of the Tibetan people. And the important consideration that these people who are discussing this have in mind is that if the four sects get together and adopt a common position, the public in Tibet will accept it. Yeah. And therefore they will not accept anything contrary to that which the Chinese may want to do.
Mr. Ranade, do the four sects need to come together on reincarnation? Or isn't it more important for them to come together on their position on China? For example, it doesn't matter what happens after Dalai Lama, but in his lifetime, doesn't he need to do two things? One, for example, he has to spell out the terms he would like the Tibetan people to stick to in negotiating with China. So what is your negotiating posture which is not amenable to compromise? He's not listed that. And second, give them a clear direction, indication about a succession or reincarnation, which could be done through these four sects coming together, etc. But shouldn't he tell them this is the line that we have to take in negotiating with China in trying to maintain whatever values the Tibetan people hold dear, whether it is sovereignty or independence or what have you?
Agreed. Actually, that is what they are working on how to spell it out and what exactly direction to give. Yeah, let me just digress a little bit and say that the four sects are actually absolutely independent of each other. they don't come under the Dalai Lama per se.
Absolutely.
It is just in his capacity as the temporal and spiritual head combined that they came under him. So they are also trying to maintain their independence. As far as the Dalai Lama is concerned, the only statement that he has made so far, which is quite clear, is that his reincarnation or his successor will have to continue the unfinished task that he has begun. So that is the clearest indication really that the next Dalai Lama will also continue to negotiate or strike a better deal with the Chinese. But I think they've still got to work out as to what kind of path they're going to follow and what they're going to do. Because those instructions will have to go not only to these 4 sects, but they'll also have to be sent out to the people inside Tibet. So I think that is what they're working on here.
Yes.
The other thing is that, of course, while the sects will be different, I think his effort will be to try and get them to agree to stay together even after he's not on the scene. Because now by sheer dint of his
For
personality,
that, there has
he's
to be a
keeping-
political platform that he must spell out.
Well, even if he gets the heads of the 4 sects or the top lamas of the 4 sects to agree to stay together, which is what they decided when the Dalai Lama came into India. They got together and said, we'll accept you as, in principle, our leader. Something like that, if he does, then it will keep the movement going together.
Okay. Dr. Jacob, what would happen if the current Dalai Lama were to accept the political tenet that Tibet was always a part of China?
Oh, I don't think that's happening. The thing is, the Tibetans have never agreed to the formulation that Tibet was always a part of China. And frankly, from the Chinese side also, there are confusing signals. The Chinese have shifted their date of control over Tibet several times since 1949. So, in a sense, if the Chinese are not sure of the history, the Tibetans at least are very, very sure of their history. And I think the Tibetans are not likely to change that position.
You met the Dalai Lama recently. What would be the consequences of ambiguous position on Tibet and its relationship with China? And what would be the implications for demarcating the India-China border along the McMahon line? Would this not put the validity of, if you say that Tibet is part of China, would it not question the validity of the Shimla Accord of 1914 between Great Britain, Tibet and China? And its annexures defined the boundary of China and Tibet, but derivatively also the boundary between Tibet and British India, which later on became the McMahon line.
Firstly, the Rinpoche made a statement a few years ago very clearly saying that Tawang was part of India, Arunachal Pradesh was part of India. The Dalai Lama himself has said that. And in various ways they have said that the Tibetans recognize the validity of the 1914 agreement. So far as that chapter is concerned, it is closed. We don't have to worry about the Tibetan position on this, although China claims Tawang and Arunachal Pradesh based on the fact that it was part of Tibet at particular historically, and that they are actually taking care of the Tibetan sentiment when they claim this. So I don't think that part is going to happen, that they're going to agree. And the Chinese and the Tibetan position is very firm on this, and that is the reason why the dialogue broke down. One of the major reasons is that Tibetans are unwilling to accept the formulation that Tibet was always part of China. They are willing to accept the formulation that Tibet is part of the People's Republic of China, or for that matter, that they accept the People's Republic of China's sovereignty over Tibet. But the 1914 agreement was before the People's Republic of China was formed. So if they take that position, it does not affect the validity from the Tibetan point of view of the 1914 agreement.
But the Chinese walked out of the 1914 agreement. They came for negotiations and their representative then walked away.
Yes,
and the agreement was signed by sovereign Tibet with Great Britain. So does that make a difference from the Chinese perspective?
Well, they all initialed it. And after that, the Chinese representative said, I have to consult Beijing, and then refused to sign it.
Yeah.
Beijing refused to sign it. But as far as the Chinese are concerned, they're still operating on the track that that 1914 agreement has to be in some sense devalued or made irrelevant. And so they've been working on Britain and managed to get 2 statements out of them that, saying that suzerainty was an outdated concept even at that time in 1914, and therefore was not valid and was wrongly put in. So I think as far as the Chinese concerned, they're still hung up on that. But as was mentioned, it is a closed chapter, so there's no reason for us to really open it up again. Arunachal they call southern Tibet. This since 2005. Before that, they didn't seem to have any sensitivities for the thinking of the Tibetan people. And now, as of May 2013, they've started calling Ladakh as Little Tibet. So what does this mean? Does it mean that they're going to now stake the claim that since Tibet was there, both these territories also belong to them? So there are a lot of ambiguities in what the Chinese are saying and how they are trying to present themselves. The bottom line is they feel they can, because they are growing strength, that they can bully people into surrendering these areas. And I think that is what we are seeing. It's not so much of, as I said, the Dalai Lama going to Arunachal Pradesh gives them an excuse to raise the issue. Also to raise the issue that they're going to try and dominate the succession of the Dalai Lama. They've also started identifying the so-called tulkus or other Rinpoches. They've got about 890 of them identified. So they're trying to strengthen their position that they will decide on the next Dalai Lama.
We've really run out of time. We could have continued this discussion, but I'd like to thank all of you, Dr. Jabin Jacob, Mr. Jayadeva, Ranade, Ambassador Kanwal, Sibal, for participating in this discussion. That is all we have for you today. We'll be back again as usual next week. Until then, goodbye and thanks for watching India's World.